Imagine it's the late 1980s, and you're in the waiting room of an esteemed university, and someone leads you down the hallway into a soundproof chamber, like this. And they sit you in this chair, blindfold you, and put a helmet on your head. Then they shut the lights, close the door, and leave you there in total silence for an hour. Now, if you don't fall asleep, because, let's be honest, I would totally fall asleep. But if you don't, that's when things start getting interesting. Because suddenly, the room they left you in doesn't feel so private anymore. In fact, you'd swear you're not alone. Now, what or who exactly is in that room with you depends greatly on what you believe and maybe even what scares you. For some people, it might be a demon. For others, it might be God. For some, aliens. In fact, some people might even have an out-of-body experience and be in the room with themselves. Now, if all that sounds crazy, wait till you hear this. Experiences like this have been happening in this room from 1984 to 2018, and what's more, the scientific community takes it very seriously. Oh yeah. Stick around. My name is Michael J. Baker. For 13 years, I investigated claims of sensed presences. That feeling that something intelligent is nearby when nothing can truly be seen or heard. This type of experience shows up everywhere. Hauntings, religious encounters, near-death experiences, sleep paralysis, even extreme isolation. Tonight we're talking about a controversial set of laboratory experiments that attempted to reproduce this experience using weak, patterned magnetic fields applied to the brain using this. A modified snowmobile helmet from the 80s and a handful of electromagnetic coils. Let me explain. In 1983, Dr. Michael Persinger, a neuroscientist at the Laurentian University in Sudbury, Canada, published a paper with a provocative title, Religious and Mystical Experiences as Artifacts of Temporal Lobe Function, a General Hypothesis. The hypothesis was simple, but explosive. Religious experiences, mystical visions, and felt presences could all be produced inducing temporal lobe microseizure-like activity in the brain, basically a form of induced temporal lobe epilepsy. This idea eventually led to what Persinger referred to as the Koren helmet experiments, named for his colleague Stanley Koren, who actually built the device. The claim was extraordinary, but precise. Not that they created God, not that they summoned spirits, but that two specific classes of experiences could be reliably evoked, the sensed presence and the out-of-body experience, using non-invasive, extremely weak magnetic fields patterned to mimic physiological brain activity. The device, often called the God helmet in the media, is far less dramatic than the name suggests. It uses small electromagnetic coils placed around the temporal lobes, which are triggered by a computer to induce the required magnetic pattern. The fields involved are about 1 microtesla, millions of times weaker than MRI and comparable to the Earth's natural geomagnetic variation. But field strength isn't the key here, it's pattern. Persinger's team found that irregular frequency-modulated patterns applied for about 30 minutes were far more effective than simple random sine waves. In other words, the volunteer's brain needed to believe that the patterns being used by Persinger were in fact its own, and not some random signal. The participants used in this research were not told what to expect. They sat blindfolded in a dark, quiet room. Many people reported nothing, but a significant subset reported something very specific. A presence just behind them or beside them, a feeling of intelligence or agency, emotional intensity, sometimes fear, sometimes comfort. Crucially, participants did not agree on what the presence was. Some called it God, some called it a spirit, some said it felt like themselves but not quite. The experience itself was interpreted, not dictated. It's not surprising that Persinger's explanation for these unusual experiences is more neurological than mystical. It basically comes down to this. The human brain has two hemispheres that normally keep each other in check. The left hemisphere tells the story of who you are, things like language, narrative construction, linear reasoning. The right hemisphere helps your brain know where your body ends and the outside world begins, things like body awareness, spatial orientation, proprioception, which is where you are in space. But if the right temporal activity becomes dominant, overstimulated, or out of sync via the injected magnetic fields, it can interfere with the brain's unified sense of self. And that's where neuroscience begins brushing up against reports of paranormal presence, shadow figures, and even some religious experiences. Now, it's very important to note that belief plays a vital role here as well. Belief, while not fully responsible for the generation of the experience, does help shape the interpretation. People with different belief systems tended to report experiences that aligned with those beliefs. For example, religious-minded people claim to see angels, God, or in some cases, Satan. Non-religious subjects tended to experience something more secular, such as ancestors, deceased relatives, or even abstract beings such as aliens. Even hardline skeptics were not immune from the effects. In 2004, science writer and skeptic Michael Shermer agreed to sit beneath the coils during a BBC Horizon documentary. Now, Shermer did not enter the lab expecting revelation, yet during the session he reported a subtle but unmistakable sensation, as he later described it, a feeling of another me in the room. For Shermer, the moment wasn't proof of paranormal experience. It was proof of how fragile and fascinating our sense of self can be. The helmet itself didn't create meaning. It created ambiguity, and the brain, doing what the brain does best, filled in the rest. That's why skeptics and believers alike reported experiences, just labeled differently. It's also important to note that even though Persinger's findings were peer-reviewed by the legitimate scientific community, not all labs were able to replicate the results. Some found weaker effects, some found none, and that inability to replicate the results reliably does matter. But here's what often gets lost. Persinger's team demonstrated that context, sensory deprivation, field patterning, and timing were all critical. Change or miss the mark on any of those metrics and the effect just disappears. Which suggests something important. This isn't a blunt instrument. It's a delicate interaction with perception, and the details matter. The experience is real, the interpretation is human, and the boundary between self and other is much thinner than we think. So let me leave you with this final question. What does Persinger's work mean for modern paranormal investigation? If weak, complex magnetic fields can alter temporal lobe activity, if subtle fluctuations can generate a sensed presence, if the brain can misclassify its own activity as other, then what exactly are investigators measuring when their electromagnetic field meters spike? Are they detecting a spirit? Or are they detecting an environmental trigger, something capable of nudging the human brain into an altered state? For decades, investigators have treated magnetic readings as evidence of an external entity. But Persinger's research suggests a different possibility. Maybe the field isn't a ghost. Maybe the field is the catalyst, and the brain simply part of the equation. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and question everything.